All right, our last part of our video, we're going to look at some mathematical functions, and you'll see how this is used. All right, so first, let's kind of define some new functions. Right? So again, we'll use f, g, and h. So the first one, this oftentimes is how you're going to see these functions defined. So this says f of x is equal to x plus 3. Okay? All right, and so what this is saying is if you input a value, right? So we'll say this is our input. If you input some number here, we'll call it x, then this is going to be what's outputted. Okay, so again, if you input a number here in place of x, then this is what's going to be outputted, this quantity, x plus 3. Right? And a way of saying that in a sentence would be the output of our function is going to be the sum, or adding up, the input and 3. Right? So if you put in a number to f, then it's going to output the sum of x plus 3. It's the sum of your input and 3. Right? So in other words, let me kind of make a little note here. Let's say I wanted to calculate f of, let's say, 6. Right? So this is saying if I input 6, what's going to happen? Well, my output is going to be the sum of our input and 3. In other words, the output is going to be 6 plus 3, right? Which is 9. So f of 6 is equal to 9. In other words, if you input 6, you get the output 9. If you plug in 6 to this computer function, it'll spit out 9. Okay? And again, I want to emphasize this does not mean f times 6 is equal to 9. Right? You don't think of these parentheses in terms of multiplication here. This is saying if you plug in 6 into the function, it's going to spit out an output value of 9. All right, so we have to figure out our definitions for g and h. Okay? G, let's say, is defined as g of x is equal to 2 times x. Okay? I want you to pause and, in a second, write down what is this function doing. Okay? And then, actually, yeah, let's do that right now. Okay, so this is how it's defined mathematically here. G of x is equal to 2 of x. Right, pause and write down a sentence. What is this function doing? Go ahead and do that. All right, the translation is this. Right, it's saying if you put in an x value, it's going to spit out for you 2 times x. In other words, the output is the product, right, which is the word for multiplication, right, is the answer to the multiplication problem is the product of 2 and the input. Right, in other words, if you put in a number, it's basically going to double it. If you put in 5, it's going to spit out 10. If you put in 7, it's going to spit out 14. It's going to double it. Okay? H. This time, I told you what the function does. The function is going to do this. The output is going to be the square of the input. Pause and think. How would we write that mathematically? Here's what you should have. Okay? We would define h of x as, okay, our output needs to be the square of our input. All right? Our input is denoted by the symbol x. So the output has to be x squared. Okay? This is saying if you input a value, well, the output is going to be x squared. Okay? All right, so let's do a couple of examples. Right? Using these definitions for f of x, g of x, and h of x, we have to calculate some values. Right? So 16, this is saying what is f of 5? In other words, if you input 5, what's the output for this function going to be? Right? Remember, our function f of x is defined as taking x, the input, and adding 3 to that. So f of 5 would just be saying take 5 and add 3 to it. So f of 5 is 8. Easy enough, right? You need to write your answer this way. I want you to get used to this notation. Okay? Because again, this is saying if you plug in 5, this function is going to output 8. Okay? Let's do a couple more here. Right? Actually, I'm going to skip 17. You can do that one on your own. I'm going to jump to 18. 18, so this says g of negative 5. Right? So if we input negative 5 into our g function, what's going to happen? Well, remember, our g function says we're going to take our input and multiply it by 2. So g of negative 5 would be 2 times our input, negative 5. So g of negative 5 would be equal to negative 10. Okay, and again, what this is saying is that if you input negative 5, it's going to spit out negative 10. Okay. All right, go ahead and do 17, 19, 20, and 21. Okay, pause and finish that, please. All right, let's check, see what you got. So f of negative 6. All right, this is saying if you input negative 6, what should come out? Well, what should come out is the sum of negative 6 and 3. So negative 6 plus 3, that's negative 3. So if you input negative 6 into the f function, the output will be negative 3. 19. What happens when you input 4 into g of x? Right? Well, g of 4, if you input 4, the output will be 2 times 4. Or in other words, g of 4 is going to be 8. Okay. All right. 20. If you put in negative 10 into our g function, g of negative 10 will give us 2 times negative 10 for the output. So if you input negative 10, the output will be negative 20. Okay. 21, h of negative 6. We're going to input negative 6 into our h function. Right? So our h function takes the input and squares it. So here we need to take negative 6 and square it. Well, negative 6 squared is positive 36. So our input of negative 6 is going to yield an output of positive 36.